Duke basketball is 10-0 in ACC play for the first time since 2007, 2008, 18-2 overall on the year, ranked as the second best team in all of college basketball. They haven't lost at home yet this season inside Cameron Indoor Stadium, and yet sometimes you just throw all that away when North Carolina comes to town. Duke and UNC this weekend in Durham. It's going to be a good one.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So excited to have you here with us today on Thursday, January 30th, 2025. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. We're excited today to be joined by Isaac Trotter from CBS Sports and 247 to talk about everything going on with this Duke basketball team ahead of college basketball's finest rivalry on Saturday when Duke gets set to take on the North Carolina Tar Heels. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free. Wherever it is that you get your podcast, be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Also, each and every day, you're able to watch our show on YouTube. Really love seeing the growth that we've got right now on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for that support over there. Be sure to like these videos, share them with your friend, and also be sure to subscribe, most importantly, here to Locked On Blue Devils. We're on X at LO_Blue Devils, and you can follow me there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. So without further ado, let's bring him on into today's program. The aforementioned Isaac Trotter back with us once again. So good to see you for the first time here in the new year, my friend. We last spoke right as conference play was gearing up for Duke, and here they are, yet to be taken down in ACC play. Hope all's well in your world.
Yeah, doing well. Good to be back on. I feel like Duke has done, outside of a few moments where it feels like they get a little bit bored with some of the times in ACC play, they've done a good job of handling their business. And suddenly they're top 7 in offense and top 3 in defense. And it's fun when, I feel like sometimes with these teams, like you had me on the preseason and I'm like, I think this defense is going to be awesome. I really do. It's fun when you get a couple of those right, because it would be a really rough look for me if I'm coming back on and Duke was outside the top 50 in defense. So far they've been absolutely terrific defensively, and big test coming again this weekend against a desperate Carolina team that really, really needs this one for their at-large bid.
No doubt about that. I mean, you look at what North Carolina's done this season. We'll dive in a little bit more to that. But, yeah, we keep having you back because you're so smart, Isaac. And all of a sudden you look at this defense for the Blue Devils. What we didn't see coming is now the last 2 games, they've gone to zone a little bit more, which was unexpected, but it helped them get back into the games at Wake Forest. And then earlier on Monday night when they took on NC State, they went zone for a couple of possessions there. And, just totally switched things up. And all of a sudden, this best defense that we've seen in the ACC has a new wrinkle to it.
It's interesting. I think I was looking at this overall nationally. Zone rate is actually as low as it's been in college basketball. Now, part of that's just because of the extra skill and extra shooting that we've seen. But I still think it's a very fascinating wrinkle that teams need to use more of. And it's helped Duke out the last couple of times. And the personnel, I mean, they're huge. They're enormous. They're 6'6" at every spot. Like, it makes sense why it's starting to work. So I wonder if the oscillation in between all right, we can't play zone because all the shooting. I wonder if some teams like Duke are going to start taking more of that playbook and mixing it in, because when they get set defensively, they're really good. But I think just having that change up defensively with that zone gets people thinking. Like, you see a couple offensive possessions in a row where against NC State, they were trying to figure it out. It was funky. They're just not really sure what's going on. I think that's smart by the staff to have it in their back pocket, because you will need it moving forward. I don't think we've seen the last of this zone defense.
Yeah, well, and to your credit, even before this wrinkle of the last 2 games, it was still one of the top defenses in the sport thus far. So things were working, but it's always good to keep people on their toes. John Shire called it their curveball. He's given a lot of pitching analogies as of late with a splinker and his kind of fastball lineup that he's got, the differences between Maluach and Malik Brown. And now he says we've got the curveball in the zone defense. I think he's in the wrong sport sometimes when he gets deep into the pitch. And we know how much he loves the Chicago Cubs. But the fact that they're able to do something like this already as one of the best defenses just makes it so much more difficult for the team. And it feels as though the conversation around zone, because it's low, I hadn't done the research that you had, but you're right, you don't really see it across the sport. Feels elementary. It feels like people don't want to play it because, you should be able to just man up your opponent. But it works, man. It just finds ways to throw teams out of a rhythm.
Especially when you're playing a lot of teams that they weren't practicing their zone offense as they prep for Duke heading into this. So that,
fair.
I think that has certainly helped with it as well. I think there is still pockets of this team though, where defensively, I was looking this up before I came on, when Maluach and Flagg are on the floor together, Duke's rim dominance is so noticeable. I think they're shooting like 71% at the rim when those guys are on, and their opponents are shooting like 49% or 48%. That gap,
what a difference,
is utterly insane. Like, it's just insane. And I think, playing zone, you're also shrinking the amount of shots at the rim that these teams are getting. So it's like with man or with zone, I think it's going to be really, really hard for teams to score at the rim against Duke, especially when Maluach is on the floor, just because he is a complete freak show. I mean, I thought Steve Forbes' quote afterward, where he was like, he blotted out the sun basically on was pretty on point.
Yeah, fitting for his size and what he's able to do. And it's been awesome to see him get more and more comfortable on both ends of the floor. I think there's still moments on the offensive side where Duke can look to assert him a little bit more on the season to make him more of a factor. Although you look at some of this offensive stuff as of late, Cooper Flagg just hasn't slowed down whatsoever once we've turned into the league there. So we talked about the bigs on the defensive side in Maluach and Flagg. Now let's turn it over to offense with both those guys.
Yeah, I think Maluach's finishing has been really impressive. Like, he's starting to catch the ball better, I think, and being more of a lob threat. He's been one of the most efficient, play finishers in college basketball so far this season. But then Flagg, what else is there to say? Like, he's been so much better than even I thought, and I thought he was going to be awesome. Like, he offensively, I feel like he's just cooking with gas. Like, he's almost toying with teams right now. That little step back jumper he has from the mid range, he's driving left and finishing well. The footwork and the paint has been great. And I think the on the move shooting has poured gasoline on the fire for Duke. Early in the season, he is, the form looks great and the jumper's not going in. Now the jumper is going in, and it's just okay, this is an utter cheat mode offensively, and they're running him off pin downs, and you're seeing defenses get really freaked out on some of their back screens because they think that a post up is coming, and he rejects it and is popping up to the top of the key for a wide open three and can set his feet and just get right into it. And it's those added layers offensively that they're starting to get. And the player that he is now compared to what he was early in the season is really different. And that makes me go, well, God, what's he going to look like in March?
Right.
Because it could be, I feel like the progress he's made is pretty tremendous.
For sure. What's he going to look at the next level? All these things you start to think about when you're watching a Flagg play basketball. This team's been fun, man. 18-2, 10-0 for the first time in ACC play. I get the league's down, but anytime you're able to take care of business like this, especially as it's been nearly 20 years since Duke's had a start like this in ACC play, and they've won this league several times over that stretch. It's just really difficult to get off to a good start like this.
You play who's in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing. They didn't make this schedule. They didn't, they don't control the fact that NC State has struggled to put a roster together. And they don't control the fact that a lot of ACC schools have struggled to get rolling in the portal. They play who's in front of you, and they've done a good job of for the most part, taking care of business. I think back to that middle of December stretch, the Incarnate Ward game I was thinking about, the George Mason game. You're like, oh, all right, what are we good? Is everything okay? And those days feel long over, and they've done a good job of getting going. And, I think this weekend too is another interesting test because I don't think they've played a team like Carolina this year. And we'll get into the X's and O's and stuff, but it's a little bit of a different wrinkle. And I'm excited to see how a team like this, that's so big and so physical, handles a Carolina team that is so fast, so fast. It's going to be size versus speed. And I'm excited to see how that battle kind of coalesces.
Brother, you were stealing the tease for me. So we will get to that Duke and UNC game. We'll get set to preview it all after we take this first break here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, the absolute best place to find your tickets. With Game Time, attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, the connection with other fans, certainly unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite team clinch a playoff win live, and it's a memory I'll never forget. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters. Being there. The best part about Game Time is the all-in pricing. You see no surprise fees at checkout. You know exactly what you're going to be buying each and every time. Plus, knowing the tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee gives you complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Once again, create that account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Okay, so forward we go. Duke gets set for the UNC game coming up on Saturday. It's a game that everybody looks forward to. It can very much so determine people's happiness each and every year, much like we've seen this Ohio State-Michigan football run over the last few weeks in the discourse that's out there on the internet. You've got Duke, who swept the series in year one for John Shire, his second season last year. The Tar Heels got the best of the Blue Devils in both of those meetings. And now we get set for the first fight this year on Saturday inside Cameron Indoor. And Isaac, we're looking at two totally different basketball teams when we begin to set this one up.
It really is. You know, I think the one area that I'm really looking forward to with Duke is how are we defending ball screens and how are we guarding in transition? Because North Carolina wants to run. They have to score in transition, I think, to beat Duke. And, you know, Duke overall, their transition defense overall has been very good this year, like a borderline elite. But against Wake Forest, they gave up 19 points in transition. And you saw some runouts for Tyler Johnson. You saw some runouts for Hunter Salas. And that's an area that I think North Carolina can give Duke some issues. If Maluach is on the floor and maybe he's a little bit slow to get back, like I could see them trying to sprint ahead and try to score against an unset defense. The other aspect of this, Duke's elite rim defense, like I talked about, Carolina doesn't get to the rim a ton in the half court. They shoot a lot of off the dribble jumpers. So it's like some of the shots that Duke wants to give up are the shots that Carolina wants to take. And so I'm fascinated to see like what wrinkles Duke has. Like, are we switching on the perimeter? Are we can Con Knipple hold up against some of these really speedy guards like Zion James and Tyrese Proctor? Like, who are we taking, with RJ Davis? Are we switching our off ball actions? Like, they have got to do a really good job of staying out of rotation, because if they do, Carolina's going to take some bad shots and Duke is going to run away with this game. If they don't, I think there's a path for Carolina to stay into it, because they are fast enough that I think they can get Duke in rotation.
Which is going to be something to watch. Obviously, both of these teams know each other quite well over the years. When you've played a series like this, when you've got somebody like RJ Davis who's starting his fifth year within the rivalry itself, and Tyrese Proctor's been there for quite some time. Caleb Foster had experiences last year for the Blue Devils, but going to be a totally different atmosphere for the rest of this Duke squad when North Carolina comes to town. And typically we throw all of this out when you've got a big game being set up like this between these two guys. What I'm excited for is how Cooper Flagg can make an impact in this game, because all the greats that have gone through the Duke days, the first kind of images that you can think of are plays or moments or things that happen in a UNC game. That's just kind of how this has been over the years. And now we get to see Cooper Flagg get his first version of that.
Great matchup one-on-one, I think, against Drake Powell, too, who is regarded as one of the elite defenders in that class. So, freshman on freshman, Powell against Flagg, NBA evaluators are going to be all over that one. I joked to somebody earlier, this is a game where Drake Powell could make some money if he could find a way to slow down Cooper Flagg. But again, super easier said than done. I'm also fascinated to see like how small Duke chooses to go. Like, could they pivot to some Flagg at the 5 lineups? If so, and he gets a Van Allen Lubin as that matchup, like, feed me, please. Yes. Like, let's go. Like, it's a situation where I think Duke could be set up to succeed. If they opt to go small and try to like just play small with Carolina, I think that would be fascinating too, because with Flagg at the 5, maybe you get a lineup with Mason Gillis at the 4, and then you go with Knipple and Proctor and James. Like, you still have that size advantage, but you also have that speed element with a little bit of extra like movement on the perimeter to switch everything. So this is where I think Duke's ability to play multiple different styles is going to come into play, like with Flagg, and Flagg's the epicenter of that. Like, you can, kind of shift to the 3, you can play a point forward, you can play the 5 a little bit. Like, he is the one that really makes them moldable. And if they want to go big and want to just kind of like punch North Carolina in the mouth and kind of beat them, like with their physicality and their size, they can do that. And if they want to go small and try to out finesse them a little bit too, I think they can do that as well. So I think Duke has a lot of options here to play with, and I'm really cool. It's really cool to see which buttons Shire decides to press.
Yeah, it's certainly a great feeling to have when not being on the other side of things, where you're looking at okay, how do we slow this team down? What do we expect from a team that is so versatile and that sort of thing? As we kind of hyper focus a little bit on the Tar Heels specifically, we mentioned Duke coming off some 2 less than spectacular performances against Wake and NC State, but wins. North Carolina kind of in the same boat. The last 2 times out, we see them have to go all the way to overtime to knock off Boston College at home, and then they lose a game on the road at Pitt. And so now we're just hearing, the talk about what these wins could mean for North Carolina just to get into the NCAA tournament. That's just adding more pressure in so many ways to the Tar Heels, when you don't need to add pressure to a game like this, because it just, again, means so much to both of these fan bases and programs.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge, and every time I watch Carolina, their ball movement is not as good as it needs to be. They chose to play with all these guards. Like, they chose to play 4-guard lineups, but they don't pass the ball well. Like, you see multiple opportunities where they're like, you're not making that extra pass to get that Davis 3, or they're dribbling a little bit too much in isolation. And I think if they don't move the ball against Duke, they're in trouble, because Duke is just going to sit down and lock them up. And I think a big, big factor too is those pick 6 turnovers. Cadeau is pretty like turnover prone at times. If Duke can turn those buckets or those turnovers into buckets in transition, we could talk about Duke winning this game by 20. Because I think there's an aspect where Duke not only wins the shot chart game where they take more 3s and shots at the rim while Carolina takes tough 2s, and they win the shot volume game because they don't turn it over, they turn Carolina over, and they abuse them on the glass. If those 2 things, if Duke's winning the shot chart and the shot volume game, I think they run away with it.
Yeah, I hope we see that. I think when you look at what Duke was able to do mounting that comeback against NC State, we saw a lot of that with the ball pressure up top from Tyrese Proctor. I could think of a couple of Sion James runouts when he just takes the ball away and it's a dunk on the other end for him. Those guards in particular, we talked about the importance of the RJ Davis and Elliot Cadeaus of the world. And you mentioned James and Proctor a little bit earlier, but those lead guards for the Blue Devils going to be big for them to have it going.
Yeah, I'm also interested to see how often those big guards kind of invert the floor with post-ups. Could you get Con Knipple some long post-ups? Sion James, we've seen him. I kind of call him Duke's version of Drew Holiday. Like, he posts guys up. He can operate in the dunker spot. He operates in pick and rolls. He sets screens. Like, he just does so much. I wonder if they try to use that raw size. Put Cadeau on the block. Put RJ Davis on the block, make them guard. And if they bring a double team, we'll play out of it. We'll play and get open 3s. We'll spray it out and play that way. And if they don't, punish them, because they have a huge size advantage. So I'm curious to see how those big guards are up to the task, because I think defensively Carolina could give them some problem, or offensively Carolina could give them some problems with just the speed and the transition. And you got to find everybody at all times. But on that other end, you can make those Carolina small guards get really uncomfortable if they're having to play one-on-one defense against guys who are 5, 6, 7 inches taller than them.
Really fired up about the direction the Duke basketball season is going. Again, much rather be in this boat than the one that the Tar Heels are looking at right now. But these games have to be played out. Anything can happen in a game like this. We'll step aside for one more break and then start to wrap up our conversation with Isaac Trotter when we return here in just a moment. Once again, thank you so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen or first watch each and every day. Really do appreciate all of your support. And again, make sure you hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. Next, you should check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Dono and Kent Gibbs keep it real and bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And as you've noticed, today is a Thursday. That means we've got the Locked On ACC squad coming into your podcast feeds a little bit later this afternoon, where myself and all of the other ACC hosts get together, banter back and forth. It's an episode always you don't want to miss each and every week. Go check out Locked On ACC once again on YouTube or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Wrapping up our show here today, Isaac Trotter is here with us. We're talking all things Duke basketball as they get set for the big one this weekend. College game day is going to be there. Duke always is able to attract some eyeballs, but a game like this, again, we remember them over the years, and John Shire gets to continue to follow in Mike Krzyzewski's footsteps, starting his third year in this series in particular. And boy, what he's been able to do these first two seasons, I know there's a lot of hot seat chatter for Hubert Davis down the road. So a good opportunity for us to let folks know everything's pretty good over on the Duke side of things right now. I think we're all happy with what we're seeing, Isaac.
Yeah, I think at this point, you're kind of penciled in for a 1 seed. It feels like it would take almost an act of God for that not to happen. Just down the stretch, you'd need multiple 3 or 4 losses probably to not get a 1 seed. But yeah, I do think this group still has areas where they can get better. And that's like the fun part about this team, where I think that they can still press different buttons. Like, can they find a way to get Caleb Foster going? That was a guy I was really high on in the preseason. Is there a way that he can?
That's my number one thing. I want it so bad for him. Yeah.
I think he's not playing with a ton of confidence. And when you don't play with confidence, I think every part of your game suffers, especially the athleticism part of it. I wouldn't say he's popped on tape athletically. And I think that's partially because of the confidence factor too. But they can get him going. I like the Gillis extra minutes. I think he's given them a really nice, just a rock solid role player. Get Malik Brown back. Let's integrate him back into the mix. Like, there's still tweaks for this group to make. And, they have some big challenges coming up too, because Carolina obviously twice, but that Illinois game in next month is going to be really fun too, against a team that has a super high ceiling. And we could start having seeing the full, Death Star Duke start to kind of coalesce if they can, kind of figure out some of these tweaks.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what they were able to do offensively, and the defense has been so great. Still a top 10 offense that we're talking about. But I keep going back to, earlier in the week against NC State, you walk away, you only make 4 3-pointers, 4 of 20 from 3-point range against the Wolfpack, and yet you're still able to beat them by 10 and score 74 points, all of these things, and yet a really inefficient night for Duke offensively, and we're still fine. So I think that, to your point, they're bound to have a couple of more games in them where it looks like, wow, is anybody really going to be able to slow this team down?
They're still creating good shots. I just was looking this up the other day. Duke has I think they're third nationally or number 1 of all high majors, I believe, still in the number of unguarded catch and shoot threes that they're generating. Wow. It's they're creating good looks on a constant basis. And when you pair that with the rim dominance on both ends, like we talked about earlier, that's kind of the recipe that UConn used to win the title. And it's been a recipe that I think teams try to emulate. It's harder to execute. Duke has the pieces to get there, and I think they're going to continue to get in that direction. If they can, I just think the process has to be, more important than the outcomes at times. 4-20 from 3 is not great. I'm sure there's some shot selections there that John Shire would probably want back, but there's still some opportunities where I think this group is still, from a process perspective, doing things the right way to give themselves a best chance to win.
Yeah, early on in the season, I felt like there were moments in Kentucky and Kansas game where somebody like Con Knippel was forcing a thing or two and would have some off-shooting nights. And even the last few games, he's had some rather inefficient, when you're just looking at percentage and that sort of thing. But so many of his looks, it's like, of course he could shoot the ball. No one is around him. Sometimes the shots just don't fall for whatever reason.
And that's the gravity of Cooper Flagg, and I think it helps to have a passer like James on the floor. It's crazy how often it feels like Sion is the one that's triggering something. He's just such a good pressure release valve for this offense. And He creates terrific shots. I think getting him into that starting lineup was really, really smart. And, again, I think that like there's just a path for this team to be, the number one offense and the number one defense in the country. And like, I don't say that lightly. Like, that's the path that they're on right now. If they keep taking care of their business, like that's what they could become. And that's pretty enticing.
I can't wait to see this game play out on Saturday. Always a classic, always a good one. So many moments I think that we're going to walk away. I would imagine the Cameron Crazies are fired up for a game like this to truly create an atmosphere. There are clips going viral of commentary between the players, talking a little trash and barking already, which is always good to see when you get set for games like this. So I think we're bound to see another good one here in the series, Isaac.
I would agree. I think a big X factor is you better find Ian Jackson in that game. I think Ian is a guy that like can really get it going. When he plays great, Carolina just elevates into a different tier. So turn his water off early is what I would try to do, and not let him get going, or this game could get a little hairy.
Well, and he's been the center of the universe a little bit of late. There was a clip that I've been seeing from the McDonald's All-American game last year where he's being interviewed with Isaiah Evans, and Ian Jackson's claiming that Cameron Indoor's not even loud. The basketball fans don't show up, and so we're off and running, man. We have an opportunity for a big atmosphere coming on Saturday, and Ian Jackson has a chance to really shut him up.
And he also had a situation too with State where he didn't. Yeah. He was like, is that a rivalry? And he went out and banged 5 threes and had 20. So like he's a big game player. I like it. I like the fire that he's going to bring. It feels like if Carolina's like, this feels like the last stand. Like if Carolina's going to like turn it on, this would be the spot to do it. And so Duke's going to have to play, one of their best games of the season.
Yeah, he's wearing the wrong shade of blue, but given his last name, I'm obligated to like the guy, and it is really fun to watch him play basketball for sure. So, Isaac, I've really appreciated the conversations that we've had, and I know that many more are coming in the weeks to come here on Locked On Blue Devils. But right now, in the immediate moments here, what can people do to go support you? How can they find your work? What do you want to promote here?
You can follow me on Twitter at Isaac _Trotter. And then my stuff's on CBSSports.com and 247sports.com. We'll have a kind of an in-depth preview of all the best games this weekend, angles to attack if you like betting and stuff. And then I have a new story up this week, 10 trends, kind of going into the weeds of why Alabama benched Mark Sears. I thought that was kind of interesting, kind of dug into the tape for that one too. Yeah. So if you like basketball and want to know why an All-American didn't play in the second half, you can check out my Twitter for that story, or CBSSports.com.
Good to see you, man. Thanks for being here today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right. That's Isaac Trotter joining us here on today's show. As good as it gets when we're talking basketball with that guy, and really fired up for this game coming up on Saturday between Duke and UNC. Going to be a good one. Thanks so much for your support. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.